and is not completely detached from what's come before it. Although Noach had aged meanwhile and was already old 6 centuries, his work was still far from complete, as denoted by the directional shape of the reading mark. So this is going to connect us to the next word, meot, hundreds, with a tipcha, which means that it's going to roll in the concept that's come before it. During the hundreds of years, he learned various skills, shared time and experience with others and with his sons. He built the new foundation of all humanity, as stressed by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. So the 600 years that Noah had up until the day of the flood, he managed to have some influence, but we see still that Noah has this separation of himself from many others, from much of his generation. And even though he did the best thing in the generation, he is distinguished and is standing alone. Shana, year, with an etnachta, which is that stabilizing note, possibly with something looking up. However, the last year was of great significance because Noah reached an age of 600 and a beginning of the Sabbath century was expected, like after 6 days of creation, as shown by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. We have concepts in Judaism of numbers having significance. 7 is a recognition of creation. 6, therefore, represents all that's natural without the element of God being in them necessarily. So when you've finished your 6, you're about to start your 7. So if you're counting centuries, the year from 0 to 99 are the first century, even though you don't have a 100 before them. Right. So when you get to the year 600, you're starting the 7th century.
When you're 20 years old, you're 21st year.
Yeah, that's always the complication.
So what we're saying here is when he reaches 600, he's started his Shabbos century. He started his 7th century. And a side note, it can be deducted that after 6,000 years, also a kind of Sabbath will follow, and the preparation for it was already started. We will defer discussion on that. Other than to say there certainly is a possible determination of a significant change in the universe and reality when we get to the year 6000 on the Hebrew calendar. And we will not be personally around to...
wait a minute.
We will not be personally around to witness that.
Is that when all kinds of people are going to come out from the cracks?
We don't know.
About the end of the earth?
Well, they're doing that already.
I know, but not
our people. Vashem Pakarasara. On the Vav of the Vashem Pakarasara, the Zohar Darshan's future of the world. Fascinating stuff. It's the only piece of Kabbalah my father actually taught me. It's fascinating stuff.
So new?
Sorry?
So new?
No, it's not.
It's okay. It's for now. It's exactly for now. So go ahead.
No, he darshans that at the around it's the 40s. We end up our centuries become on a 40, right? So 1840, 1940, tough Reish, tough Sheen. We trace back to 1840, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and talk here about the opening up of the windows of heaven and the wisdoms of heaven falling to earth. If you look at the speed of technology and how it has evolved, the wisdoms of heaven are now coming to earth and are connecting up and building upon each other in an exponential fashion. And all this is a lead up to the ultimate.
Sorry, and where is that in the calendar? Like
1840, because
1840 equals what?
1840 is 5600. right? Because once you clap,
1940 is 5700.
right? Because it's the second half.
2040 is 5800.
It's the second half of Shabbos, right? Man was created in the afternoon of Friday, right? It's the second half of the sixth day. So this is the second half of the 6th century, right? So 5600 and thereon it starts to really pick up. So I guess 1740 was 55, so now you begin that. 1840, 1940, as you sort of clock each hour of the day and more of creation in the 7 days of creation come together. Now you see this in terms of the world and humanity reaching its potential. Its mimicking of creation by creating new things also starts to ramp up. It's fascinating stuff. This is many years ago that I read it, that I was taught. And it's all from the Vav of Hashem B'Charsar.
The Vav is a 6. So when we get to that 5600, that's when...
if we read it on Rosh Hashanah, because it's very in time to read that.
And we'll continue on. V'hamabul, and the flood, number 5, with a zakef, with a munach. Again, it separates itself out slightly from what's gone previous, and it moves into what's going to go after it. The causes which provoked the catastrophe were diversified, and the flood, as a punishing instrument, had brought a Sabbath for everyone, as suggested by the shape of the reading mark. Why? So it's separated out from the concept of what's gone before.
Because of the 6 days.
Because, well, but it's a cave. So, right, we're not going to connect it to the previous thought.
Because the Shabbos is physically separate from the 6 days, right? 6 days of creation, 7 of... So
yeah.
That's the hard stop on the 6th. Now we're starting 7 or something new.
Okay. So again, we separate out 7 from 6 because it is a recognition of God, whereas everything else is just an immersion in reality and nature. So the Hamabul and the flood is going to be separated out because it's in the 7. And it's going to lead to Haya, it was, number 6, which is a katon, which is a two-part shaped note, so it's going to have 2 elements to it. The flood started in a natural way in the beginning, before it exhibited its full strength. It was like a rainfall, mamtir, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So the flood began as normal rain, and then it became abnormal rain, destructive rain. So we have that double-shaped note to tell us that started out naturally and ended up with its full force. Mayim, with a tipcha, water. So this is going to lead back to what we had talked about before. Water, deriving simultaneously from many sources, was the essence of the great catastrophe known as the flood. The beginning was insidious, like a soaking rain, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So from that word haya, which tells us that it is something that began slow and then ended up quite differently, or began in a gentle way and then ended in a quite punishing way. So mayim, the water, is going to again exhibit that same characteristic. It's going to come from many places. It's going to seem like it's just a little bit, and it's happened before, and all of a sudden it's going to take an unnatural turn. Al haaretz, over the earth, with a sof pasuk, a stabilizing note. We're gonna go to the side note on water. The NB. The flood marked a regression to chaos and perplexity. Tohu vavohu. There were more situations of chaos comparable to the flood, although the others were rather limited by their extension. overflows of seas and rivers, disruptions of interhuman communication by mixing up the common language, Dor HaPlaga, Stom and Babel. However, the Great Flood, water was chosen as an adequate reaction for the crimes committed. Water was chosen as an adequate response for blood was spilled like water, Shafku Damim Kamayim. Crimes were committed with passion, comparable to drinking water, to calm thirst. And see, the Zohar says that they were destroying their children by pouring their seed on the ground like water. Yafik Zara al-Ara, and they would spill their seed onto the ground for contraception and experimentation. Therefore, the devastation by the flood waters was designed as a punishment comparable to the crimes of Midah Keneged Midah, measure for measure. From Mesopotamian sources, it is also known as the Great Flood, although floodings and overflows were not infrequent in this water-rich area. The flood water derived from the heaviest rain from the melted snow of the Kurdistan Mountains to the north, as well as from the open springs and fountains. Jointly, it turned the whole basin of Mesopotamia into a deep sea of water. This indicates that supernatural events occur within the framework of natural laws. And we'll talk later, when we get back to Breshit, about the significance of the letter of Beit. The timing should be viewed as the hidden factor, like in Egypt. So many times we see that our enemies miscalculate our time because they don't know the hidden that God creates the time that things that things begin to be counted from. So in the Egypt story, in the Purim story, we have miscalculations based on not knowing God's time. Our rabbi said that Israel was not involved in the flood because it is exempt from all the mathematical and physical rules. So the people of Israel had not been created by the time we're getting to this generation, because this is something that specifically has to do with nature coming to destroy a corruption of nature. So you start out with natural rain, and then you go into unnatural rain in order to destroy a nature which was corrupted from its original intention. So this is a midah keneged midah, a measure against a measure. This sort of brings to mind the common Jewish greeting of Mazal Tov. What does Mazal Tov mean? Most people will simply translate it as good luck. And it in fact means the exact opposite of that. What is a mazal? Mazal is a constellation also. And by looking at all the factors within nature, you can mathematically derive what something should be and how it will change in the future. So the holy grail of physics is to get a mathematical theory of everything, a general unified theorem, so that you can predict, okay, these are where all the atoms are in the universe right now, and this is the way that they act, and 10 seconds from now, this is the way that they'll be, and 10 years from now, this is the way that they'll be, and you could predict, if you had a good enough equation, the way that everything should turn out from here till eternity. That is nature. That is mazal. That is the way that the universe is. And that is your starting point. Your starting point is the way that the universe is and is going to unfold from here. When you speak to a Jew, we realize that we are outside of that. When Abraham looks into the stars, what is he doing? He's saying that I know all the laws of physics and nature, and I know what's going to happen. And Avram, who is 99 years old, is not going to have children with a wife who, according to the Midrash, doesn't even have a womb. So Avram looks into the stars, he looks into the ways of nature, and v'hamin b'Hashem. And God told him he's going to have a child, and he sees that God is beyond and above nature, and the things that are in nature aren't a limitation for him. He can have things that are more than that. When we're wishing someone mazal tov, we're saying that your minimum should be that everything should be good like it is now, just as a course of nature. Even though we realize you can have more. You can have things that are beyond the natural. That's where a Jew lives. Beyond the natural. You can have that. But let's make your baseline this good, great event that's happened to you right now, and all your things should unfold naturally without any need for divine intervention and becoming something even more than nature would provide you. So nature should be so good for you that this should be the way that things should unfold from you from here on in. But by the way, you can have even more. That's what Mazal Tov. It's not good luck. It's not turning things to randomness.
I will never be able to say that phrase again the same.
It's not depending on randomness or depending on the laws of the universe. It's saying you should have that as your natural order, as your bare minimum, and you can have more because you're a Jew.
Wow.
So, next, agreed. You will never hear that phrase again once you've heard the definition of what Mazal Tov really means.
It's interesting, so why aren't we taught that? Why do we use that phrase? It's too flippant, Tom.
The phrase is used, agreed, flippantly, but that's the deeper thought behind it.
Mm-hmm. People should be taught that.
I agree, and it's one of those sort of life-changing things. It's one of those things that, wow, you look at it and you say...
If I don't remember anything else, that's, wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's something.
Okay, so...
And we said that because...
Israel was not there at the time of the flood.
Right.
Because the flood is a natural event leading into an uncorrupted, unnatural event. And Israel can't be bound by natural events. We're beyond natural events. Another example of this same concept is when the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, goes through Egypt. Moshe tells Pharaoh, "Kachatzot halayla," like around midnight. He couldn't say it's going to happen exactly at midnight. Midnight is a natural concept. There's a time that's an exact halfway between the time the sun sets and the time the sun rises. That's a natural definition. Israel is beyond that nature. It's going to be beyond that exactness of drawing a line somewhere. It's infinite. It's not bound by the rules of nature. Not bachatzot halayla, but kachatzot halayla.
AKA Jewish time. Yeah, God will get them to get there.
Al ha'aretz, number 8, over the earth. Just like the flood was a particular punishment with a sof pasuk. So stabilizing, finishing the thought. Just like the flood was a particular punishment of the world, so are others foreseen to occur over the earth in relationship to the beginning of the sentence and Noach in various forms.
Others, what? Just like the flood was a particular punishment of the world, so are others foreseen.
Other punishments. So specifically, we had talked about the destruction of language that's going to happen in the Tower of Babel, and the destruction of stone by fire. That there are going to be other forms of punishment that are going to happen in the future over the earth. But this punishment is going to stand for its generation, just like Noach stood for his generation with that flag, that Zakef Gadol on Noach. V'Noach ben 600 shana v'hamabul haya mayim al haaretz. The Resha The beginning of the sentence tells us of Noah's achievements and his full attempt to comply, and the Mabul, the flood, in the second half of the sentence is the element of destruction. So we have the element of trying to maintain something being pitted against the element of destruction, the Resha being the more elevated, and the Sefer being the more diminished, the more negative. And I think that's where we'll close for the evening.
Yasher
And
Koach.
so God willing, again next week.
Thank you very much.
Yasher Koach.